Welcome to Highlighted, a Life Church Midweek Podcast. Here we're on a journey to look for ways to make our sermons more practical in our everyday lives, and we want to inspire you to live out your faith every single day, not just on Sundays. In each episode, we highlight our sermons and our ministries to see how God is working in our church and through our community. And as always, I'm joined with the greatest pastor in the world.
Aw, thanks, bud.
I say that every week. This week, I mean it just a little bit more because if you weren't here on Sunday, you gave me a hug and gave me a birthday card on Sunday, so that's why. That's why I mean it a little more.
Okay.
But also, if you weren't here on Sunday and you missed Sunday's sermon, now's the perfect time to pause and go back and listen to it. Either that or you have like two homework options, I guess. If you didn't listen to the sermon, you either have to go back and watch the sermon or listen to the sermon on the podcast, or you can go and read the whole book of Numbers in preparation for today's episode.
Yeah, you could also call somebody and be like, hey, what was Sunday's sermon about? And if they know, then you get, a decent understanding. And if they don't know, you can be like, what the heck, man?
You could be like, hey, Pastor, so-and-so was here Sunday, and they have no idea what you were talking about.
No idea. We talked about Zelophehad's daughters.
See, I didn't want to say it because I didn't want to have to say his name or his daughters' names by that. So that's actually test option number 3 for homework. If you were here on Sunday, in the comments below, can you phonetically spell the names of all four daughters? 5 daughters, yeah.
Yeah. Milka. Hogla. I can't remember all of them.
Wow.
I know. I'm terrible.
Okay, I'm sitting here with the second greatest pastor in the world.
There was 2 more. I can't remember the other 2. But I had to write out phonetically how to say them.
Yeah.
And the problem is, though, I only did it once in my notes at the beginning.
And every time
didn't
you
do
went
it
back,
anywhere else, I would have to go back to. And Zelophehad's one of those names that I struggle with remembering how to pronounce it, because when you look at it, it does look like that, but it's very intimidating because it's like got 65 letters in it.
Yeah. So here's your last opportunity. If you miss Sunday, if none of this means anything to you,
right, you need to go back.
You need to go back and listen. And before we talk about Sunday, you preface this on Sunday too, but it's so interesting that in this long list of names, really, and you joked about it on Sunday, right? You start your annual Bible reading plan, and you're super excited. You read through Genesis, you're like, awesome, like creation. You get some Moses and Jacob, and then you really dig into Moses in Exodus, and you're like, okay, the Israelite people, and you're walking through with them in the wilderness. And then you kind of hit a wall,
right,
with the next 3 books.
Yeah.
And it just feels like, oh my goodness, but especially like Leviticus is one of those things that's like, it's hard to get through because it's all law.
Yeah.
But it's also like, it's contextualizes a lot of the Old Testament for us. So at least there is like this little bit of like saving grace to like, oh, okay, I can bear through this because it helps me understand what I just read in Exodus better, or it helps me understand what we're going through in our midweek Bible study about the life of David better.
Right.
But then you get to the book of Numbers, and it's just this like long list. And you said it on Sunday that there's maybe like 3 people that are going to enjoy that and really love digging into that. But in the middle of this list, there's this story of seemingly unimportant people, and I don't want to dig into it too much because, again, last chance. If you still don't know what we're talking about, please go back and watch Sunday's sermon and then jump back over here to this video. But it's seemingly these nobodies,
right?
It's not like, oh, so-and-so in the line of David, or so-and-so who later went on to be in the line of Jesus, right? In the line of David. So it's nothing like that, or it's not even like Moses is familiar.
Right.
But like the story's not really about Moses.
He's barely in the story.
They go to Moses,
right.
And I thought, not to piggyback too much off of last week, in the floating axe head, but it's so interesting that 2 times now that there's this problem, and the solution is to go to the man of God. So maybe we'll dig into that in a little bit. But again, it's so interesting. I love this series so much because it's seemingly so unimportant about this land dispute,
Right.
over someone who passed away. It's like, why is this in the Bible? Like, why do I need to know about it? But it shifts the trajectory
Yeah.
of all the people that are going to live after them because it changes the law.
Yeah.
So it's this super interesting dynamic of there's these nobodies who are faced with a problem that seemingly shouldn't matter to anybody else in any of the tribes of Israel, and yet they bring it before Moses, and Moses brings it before God, and it matters to God.
Yeah.
Which it has this very similar connotation of last week's sermon,
Right.
of this little thing that shouldn't matter to God, but it does.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's dig into Sunday before.
It's the interesting thing is that, and what I struggled with doing this sermon right after last week's because they're so similar in the main topic and the main idea. But the thing that really stood out to me, and the thing that we didn't get to heavily talk about on Sunday, we did talk about it, but not super heavy, is that this family, these young ladies, had lived their life hearing about the promise of God. Right? He's got a land for us, a land flowing with milk and honey, right? And it's ours, and he's given it to us, and he's promised it to us. They went through, I don't know how long they were in the wilderness, because my assumption is they were born into the wilderness at some point. Their father had passed away. Presumably their mother had passed away, but we never hear them talk about that. It's just a presumption because they don't talk about her, so that I think we can presume that. And there's no one to take over his family line, nobody who's going to get his inheritance. Well, they haven't even gotten into the promised land yet, but they've lived with this promise. And I think I can relate to that in some level. I think we most of us who've been in the church world for any length of time can relate to that on some level, because I know as a child, I was hearing Jesus is coming back soon. Jesus is coming back soon. Jesus is coming back soon. You're in your generation, it's going to happen, and it might, and that's fine. But we can hear those things so many times that we wonder if it's going to happen, and B, we come to places where we wonder, is that promise really for us? And maybe he's not going to come back in my lifetime, but he's coming back, right? And I have to live with that promise. And if that promise was being taken away from me in some way, would I fight for it? Would I speak up? Would I step towards the things that God, and step forward and say, this is not right? Would I step up and say, no, this promise was made to me? And I love that the picture that's painted here is that these young ladies step up and they say, listen, this promise was for us. And we went through the wilderness just like you did. Maybe not as long, Moses. Moses was from the beginning of the wilderness to the end. Maybe we haven't been here as long as you, but we've lived in the wilderness. We've heard the promise since we were babies. Our mom was rocking us, telling us this promise. We sat and watched our younger siblings, our younger sisters grow up and hearing the songs and the things that communicated this promise. And you guys are all here talking about how the land's going to be split up when we get in there. Who's going to get what? Who's going to go where? How this thing's going to happen. And that's great faith. I'm excited for that. But we can't even have faith for that because the law doesn't provide a way for us to own anything. It doesn't provide a way for us to have something. And they approach it, and this is another thing that I love, is that they approach it from the perspective of our Father's name is going to disappear. This isn't just about us. This isn't just about me and what I want and the promise that was given to me and that I've heard my entire life. It's that our Father lived in the wilderness, and he wasn't a part of that big rebellion where a lot of people died and where a lot of things happened. And his legacy is gone when we die. And that's not right. And so they speak up. They take the time to speak into the situation, and they don't presume anything. They don't look at Moses and say, this is your fault. Why are you doing this? They don't yell at God. They bring the situation. They step forward. They present the situation to God. Okay? And they then know that he's going to move. And it's this small little moment in Scripture that's a reminder to us that we are called to speak up. We are called to speak up for the promises that God has placed in our lives, not in a confrontational way, but in a way that says, listen, this is a promise and I'm living for it. And I think that a bigger picture here that we didn't get to see on Sunday is that we're all living for a promise. In this life, we're living for a promise, and we won't speak up about the promise a lot of times. We won't push in on that. And so, and on Sunday, we kind of shifted the challenge. It wasn't that challenge. The challenge that we gave was, there's something you need to speak up for. What is it? And how are you going to do it? And so,
Yeah, and you just touched on this too, is I love that it wasn't this big confrontational, like, end of the world moment. And a lot of times in our lives, the little things, or even the places that we feel marginalized or left out on, or that maybe we're not on the receiving end of a promise, or whatever our circumstance or situation might put us in, is oftentimes we feel like, oh, we need to speak up, but we need to like fight. Yeah. Like we need to speak out, not even just speak up and bring clarity to the situation. But there's this like dignity and this poise in the way. It's not like the Bible doesn't say they yelled at Moses for 20 minutes and cussed him out and, did all these things and then paid all this money and did all these like performative things that like a lot of people would probably have done. Like, hey, Moses, like, I know we're not men, but we have this jewelry that, we can give it to you and you could do something like in the tabernacle or the temple, like whatever, God's speaking to you, better how to use it. And they didn't try to bribe Moses or like manipulate their way in. Yeah. But they had their problem and they just presented it clearly, with clarity and with authority. And a lot of times I feel like we often miss the mark on that. Like when something goes wrong in our life, whether it's with a peer or with a leader or in the church with other brothers and sisters in Christ, we're not bringing this situation with clarity. We're not going into it with the sound mind thinking like, hey, this is my issue. And rather than, I'm not just going to put you down because I'm right and you're wrong, but I'm just going to bring clarity to this is what has happened. Yeah. And oftentimes, we're always right. Oftentimes we always know what's best. And in reality, time and time again in scripture, we're shown that we don't know what's best. Yeah. And, had it been God's will, like, I think they would have been okay with Moses's response being different. Yeah. Had it been God's will, I think they would have walked away unchanged, unaffected, and with a little more peace though. And said, hey, sorry, this is the law that God has given me. Yeah. It's not going to change. But that's not what happens. And we see the other end of it. But to have that kind of boldness and that faith to speak up, to even go before Moses is like, that's scary. Because it's like, you've heard stories about this guy. This is the guy that like led your people out of slavery and captivity. This is the guy that, the 10 plagues of Egypt. Right. Like, you've heard these stories. Like, you're like, my great grandfather, like, he said that it was weird. They put blood on the door frame and this angel of death came through. And it's I can only imagine, like, as a child, this story's got to freak you out. Yeah. Like, I imagine, like, the older siblings and the cousins and stuff, they're always like, hey, just in case, like, the angel of death might come get you out here in the wilderness too. And at least one of those little kids just up all night freaking out. So they've, like you said, they've heard the stories. They know what it's like to walk through the wilderness. And they're not just going to some authority figure or they're like their tribe leader or some other like head honcho. They're going to the head honcho. The guy, yeah. They're going to the guy that came down the mountain glowing because he was in the presence of God. So there's got to be this extra level of intimidation. And I feel like if I was in this situation, I would like use this opportunity. Like, I'm just going to kiss up to Moses. And like, if anyone's going to change the law, it's going to be Moses. So like, let me present this in a way, maybe even let me lie about some things, manipulate the things so I can get my way. But they don't do that. Right. And I just think it's so interesting that it's similarly, like I said, to last week, is they didn't go diving in headfirst in the water, panicking for their axe head. Right. But they went to the man of God and they said, hey, this is the problem. We need your help. And then what's really even cooler than that, like Moses had all the authority to say, nah, it doesn't matter. Or that's your problem. I'm sorry.
Right. Doesn't work like that.
Or even like,
whatever.
who are these girls? Aaron, come here. Come take care of this. Ladies, Miriam, come here. Come take care of this. Like, it could have been anything, but
Sure.
he hears them out, and then he goes and he brings their case before the Lord.
Yeah.
Which is like crazy leadership model from Moses to say that, like, this insignificant thing that doesn't affect anyone else, really. Like, it matters to God, and I'm going to bring it before him. Yeah. And it really shows the heart and the character of who Jesus is.
Yeah.
Through this moment.
Yeah, because God does what is so unexpected here. There is no one in the room that I thought I think God thought God would say, "Oh, they're right." Right? And yet that's exactly what he says, it's exactly where he goes and exactly what he does, and he's showing them. The whole wilderness episode was about them understanding who their God is, right? They're being reintroduced to this God that they had kind of been estranged from in Egypt. In fact, when they called out in Egypt, they were just calling out for something to save them. It wasn't even necessarily that they were calling out to the God that saved them. They were just calling out, is the way that it's written. And so God steps up, and now he's got to reintroduce himself to them and let them know, hey, this is who I am. And so the whole wilderness episode is that. And then they get here, and there's this moment right at the edge of the wilderness where God is either going to be like every other God, or he's going to be very different. And he consistently shows he's a very different God. He cares about those who are oppressed, those who are weak, those who are viewed as less than. And he's going to continue to show this over and over and over again. But in this one instance, we can see, and I kind of like what you said this at the beginning of what you said earlier. You said they spoke up without speaking out. They didn't have to yell. They didn't have to. They went in. They gave truth. They presented truth, and they left it in the hands of God. And for them, they left it in the hands of Moses, who I think they probably assumed would take it to God, and he did, and he left it there, and God did something totally drastic and totally different with it than anyone would have imagined. And I think that's where the application to this is. Many times we don't want to leave the small things in the hands of God because we think we can handle them. They could have just assumed and went through life that everything was going to be the way that it was, and we're just out of luck. And yet they trusted that God cared enough about them. And I think it comes back to this idea that they understood the promise was for all of them, not just for a handful, not just for a select few. And I think we choose at times to lay the promise down and take up our own things and do our own things. And they could have done the same thing, and none of this would have happened. And yet God orchestrated it as such that they would come to the man of God, present for him not an issue at all. Moses isn't even going to go into the promised land. He's not even going to be allowed to go in. And so, right on the precipice of going in, he already knows he's not. And so for him, not a big deal, right? For the people that surrounded him, not a big deal, because this isn't my family. I don't care. And yet they took it before God, and God drastically changed things because these young women spoke up. All they had to do was take it before God, and God takes what seems meaningless or trivial to others, but is a big deal for us.
Yeah, and what's also crazy about the situation is it's not just abnormal in, Israelite culture and Hebrew culture to do this. Like in all world cultures around the time, this is like counterculture, divisive, like this shouldn't even be a thing.
Right.
Not even a second thought, not even like a back of the mind thought, like, well, what if we bring it to Moses? And so to know that, that in similar to today, like the word of God is going to be different than what culture says, right, or what culture deems is okay. Yeah. And, had they gone and presented this same case to Egypt, they probably would have gotten killed. Yeah. Like, why are you bringing this before me? Much less even had an audience with Pharaoh. Or even, down the timeline some, like if you do this during the Babylonian exile, like, yeah, right.
Done.
prison, dead, furnace, wherever, it doesn't matter. And even once we get into the New Testament and Rome is in control, like, yeah, right.
Yeah.
Like, we are our own God is what Rome is saying. And so to know that all of these great empires, all of these great, dominant, smart, agile, resourceful, like, who the world says, like, yeah, you're powerful, you should be in charge, you have all of this art and knowledge and wealth and all of these things, all of it is seemingly nothing compared to what God says.
Right.
And no matter the influence that even Egypt had on them at the time, like you said this, they were calling out to who knows who, just like longing to be just saved out of this thing. Like, they didn't know who their God was. They didn't know what their culture even was anymore, because they had been enslaved for so long and been told who they are for so long. And so for them to even get an audience with Moses is countercultural. For them to even say what is on their mind is countercultural. And then for God to overturn it is this crazy, like, paradigm shift. Like, the word of God carries so much more weight than what other cultures might be doing, what they say is okay or what they say isn't. And it's such a valuable lesson that we especially need today, right? When the world says 10,000 things that are countercultural to what we believe, or that go against what God says, it's easy to say, well, Pastor, I do believe that, but, like, you don't know the people I work with. Like, I believe that, Pastor, but you don't know who my parents are. I believe that, Pastor, but you don't know what my neighbor thinks. And we can fill in the blank with whoever, whatever, whenever. But to know that in this poised, very respectful problem, like, that, again, is seemingly nothing. Like, it shouldn't matter. It'd be like a laughing stock if I went to the United States government and been like, well, I'm supposed to inherit my father's land,
right?
But due to this technicality in the law, it's not going to go to me or anyone in our family. They'd be like, tough luck.
Yeah.
Like, it's ours now.
Yeah.
Like, we don't care. Like, you should have thought of that when he was still alive.
Yeah.
But it's not that. And it's this opportunity for not just them to go before Moses, not for them to even be obedient in this. Because, I mean, your heart's got to be pounding out of your chest. Like, I'm going before the man who split the Red Sea. And we understand that God did that, right? Moses did that. But, like, there's got to be this heavy weight.
Yeah.
Even going before Moses. And I feel like if I was one of these ladies, I probably, even if I had the opportunity to speak before Moses, I would, never mind. Like, I don't want to bother.
Not that big of a deal.
It's fine. We're just going to live our lives and it's going to be okay. We're still going to go to the promised land. We're just not going to own any land. Like, it'll be okay. Like, we're not a part of the group that isn't going to get to enter in. So, like, at least we get to enter in. At least we don't have to wander in the wilderness any longer. It could be worse. And that could have easily been a mindset. But for them to carry this boldness in and to do it with respect is such a heavy-handed thing, because oftentimes we're so inherently selfish that even when respect is needed, even when we're right and they're wrong, all respect goes out the door because we're right. And so to understand that this counterculture moment that is presented with etiquette and respect and dignity is presented before God, and he doesn't just change the situation for them.
Yeah.
But he rewrites the law.
Yeah, it's a legacy situation.
Yeah. And it impacts generations to come. And, oftentimes we find ourselves in those very shoes where we have something that we can bring before God, and it's going to impact the next generation to come. It's going to impact not just our kids, but our children's children and their children's children. And you talked about, people are saying that Jesus is coming back. And that's true. We believe that, but we don't know when.
Right. And
so if he wants to come in the next 20 years, awesome. If he wants to come in the next 200 years, awesome. 2,000 years, whatever it might be. And what we're leaving behind, the legacy that we're leaving behind, doesn't just matter for us. It doesn't just matter for those related to us, but it matters for everyone who's going to walk this road after us.
Yeah.
And if we find ourselves in the family of Christ and belonging to him, and we ought to strive to make that pathway easier for the next person, and to do it with honor and respect, and to choose kingdom trust in these circumstances. And we just did a whole series on this at the beginning of the month. That's what I meant. I said month, but it was over a month-long series at the beginning of the year. Yeah, so anyway, to just kind of turn a hard left turn, I feel like, is what God did in this moment. And it didn't just speak to this specific law either. I think it definitely showed the people of Israel, hey, like, I'm a God who knows your needs. I'm a God who listens to them, and I'm a God who provides a way when there seems to be no way.
Yeah, and all it took was some young ladies deciding to live in the promise intentionally and not in the problem.
Yeah, and I've just constantly reminded throughout this whole series that God will speak through whatever means necessary, right? He'll speak through a floating axe head that honestly would have been cooler if it like grew its own handle. We talked about this last week. Or even like it would have been so much cooler if this was like a cool situation and not a land dispute over like, oh, our father died and no one's going to inherit his land. But seemingly in the middle of this long, boring chapter of the Bible, we're faced with a story that is it's 11 verses.
Yeah.
And it's not even like something that we find out that Z-Man's great-grandchildren actually inherited the land after them. I wasn't going to say his name. Yeah, I called it a Z-Man.
I like it.
His great-grandchildren inherited the land, and they actually started to become shepherds. And those sheep, gave birth to David's sheep that he took care of. It's not even some my uncle's grandfather's dog walker's cousin. But seemingly it's nobody's.
Right.
That we don't hear about again. We don't know, but he cares so much about them that he wrote down their names in the Bible, and those are some hard names to write down and to remember. So I feel bad for Moses writing the book of the law, and he's hearing from the voice of God. He's like, can you spell that again? Like,
what?
Do I have to sound that out? And
he says Zelopha bread. What is that?
Oh, how? I know I talked to these girls, but
I only saw 3.
I was like, I don't even know their name. Like, how do you even spell that, God? But it just is a constant reminder that these little things matter, and God can use whatever he wants to speak and to move in whatever situation. And it's a reminder for us to keep our eyes open, to keep our ears open, and to keep our heart ready to move when God says to move.
That's good. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
Biblically obscure.
Super obscure, right?
Yeah.
Talk about obscure. We go from tent peg. Well, we started with Mephibosheth. I almost
you were
messed that
right
up.
there.
I know.
Yeah.
And a floating axe head, tent peg, all of these things, land dispute.
Yeah.
And it's like, how are these things like even connected? But to even see how like just these last 2 weeks have gone hand in hand with super unrelated accounts in Scripture, with super unrelated even like people that are in them, or in time periods even, and to see how God can use it to speak truth and to show the gospel through all of it is super incredible. So again, I love this series so much. We're taking a break from the series this Sunday because this Sunday is Mother's Day. We're going to be honoring all of our moms, mother figures, spiritual mothers, all the women in the church. So we have some free gifts that are pretty cool this year. I'm kind of jealous.
Yeah, me too.
Honestly, a little bit. Maybe not fully, but it's going to be an awesome gift. I know that Casey's going to love them, Marissa's going to love them, my mom's going to love, like all the ladies are going to love these things. So make sure you invite your mom to church. It's going to be a good time. It's Mother's Day is always a great time. It's always fun to celebrate. And I feel like usually it's like the church joke to like Mother's Day is the fun day. Father's Day is the like, hey man, you guys suck.
Yeah, we're not doing that.
But we're not doing that. We're not doing that. So Father's Day is coming next month, which is going to be a lot of fun as well. And these two are going to go hand in hand, just like last year. It's going to kind of be this mini series that is spread out over, a month break in between the two. but they're going to play hand in hand with each other. It's going to be a lot of fun. And as always, there's so much happening in the month of May. So make sure you grab your May at Life handout next time you're in the building. If you haven't already gotten one this month, graduation Sunday, Mother's Day. We have so much going on. House of Prayer is coming up. It's coming fast. And Kids Fest is just around the corner. So I'm super pumped for everything that God is doing here and now, and I'm glad that we don't have any land disputes that we have to go before God and deal with.
That's
like
fair.
We get to deal with, oh, God, what do you want to do at Kids Fest? How do you want to use us at Kids Fest to reach our community? And I would much rather deal with that and do that than have some sisters come up and say, hey, pastor, you're not going to believe this, but, my father died because of his sins. And we're like, whoa, what do you mean by that? But as always, this series is a lot of fun. As always, there's so much going on. And as always, we love you, and we can't wait to see you again soon.